Hey everybody, Kate here. It is 1:15 where I'm at and 12:15 on the West Coast. And I hope you're having a great week and a great Friday wherever you're at in the world. Today's Facebook Live, we are going to be talking of the second pillar of the 6-pillar framework that makes up an unbreakable body. And that is strong glutes. And so to this, I just do want to give you a heads up as you're starting to watch this. This week, next week, and the week after are really going to like intertwine with each other quite well and in an important way. So I'm going to strongly encourage you to make sure you tune in to not only this week, but also next week and the following week as well. Not only because you're going to get an amazing joke at the end of every Facebook Live, but also because today with strong glutes, next week with stable hips, and the week after that with strong torso, these 3 areas of your body are so interconnected, it's almost impossible to pull them apart. And you'll see why when we talk today, because we are going to be digging into things like the poor, maligned piriformis muscle that just takes the brunt of everybody's dissatisfaction with their rear end and the pain in their body. We're also going to talk about treadmills and how they are a great disservice to glutes, especially when you are on treadmills that are kind of the classic kind that most of us have experienced in our kind of training career. And then also we're going to have a little chat about how we can actually get our glutes to fire better, because squats and lunges and all of that is great, provided your glutes are firing, and they don't always do that. So I'm going to help you learn how to do that. As we have this conversation though, you're going to notice that there are some components where you go, well, seems like this should dovetail into like more talk about the hips, more talk about the torso. And that will happen. But as a part of the 6-pillar framework, we always focus on this area and knowing it's tangentially moving out to other parts of the body. But in the construct of a conversation like we're going to have today, we're going to keep it focused on the glutes. Okay. All right. So as you're all tuning in, it's so great to see you all here. I do want to remind you, drop your questions in the comments below. We always answer those at the end before we do our joke of the day, which we have a new one for you today. I'm so excited about it. And then also, I want to let you know that we're talking about strong glutes. So let's all be adult here and not have like 4th grade butt humor. Just a thought. Okay, great. I have to say that because there's like 3 people in the audience who I think might tune in today who particularly have a thing when it comes to like, let's talk about butts. All right. That being said, let's dig right in. First thing I want to talk about today is the piriformis muscle. And you probably are familiar with it because it's that pain in your butt that you've likely gotten after sitting for a long time, or if you've been at a desk for a number of years, or you've just had any kind of pain in your hips and your low back. Often the piriformis gets all tied up into that, or we think that it does. It also is kind of blamed for a lot of the sciatic nerve pain that comes up as you're like dealing with discomfort and all the things that modern life gives you. One of the most chronic things people get is sciatic nerve pain, and they go, that darn piriformis, darn it all. And like that's maybe not well put, like malevolence to like just the piriformis muscle, because it's this whole big complex thing. Let me explain. So the piriformis muscle is deep inside your butt, kind of where like the hip and the femur and the spine all come together. You see, we're already interrelating here. And part of its job is to provide stability for the femur and the hip kind of interplaying with each other. And it does do some work to generate a little bit of power, but mostly it's a great stabilizer and then supportive of things like your bigger muscles like the glute max, the glute med, and so on. But when the piriformis has hypertonicity or holds more tone than it should, and that doesn't mean tone like I'm so svelte and toned. It means like the tone of the muscle, literally like how toned is the muscle, how much tenseness is in it. And if you are someone who has chronic tenseness, there's a strong chance that you might have some hypertonicity. And so what that essentially means is the muscle is kind of holding this low level like all the time, and it never gets a chance to go, we're in kind of like the neutral, like not flexing all the time state. Hypertonicity can happen for a number of reasons. We're going to get to more on why that happens in just a second, but know that that can be something that happens. When that happens with the piriformis, it can create some pain around that area, because one thing the piriformis can do is kind of like strangle the sciatic nerve a little bit and kind of compress on it. And as anyone who's experienced any sort of nerve thing, which even if you've never had like a spinal nerve thing, go ahead and give yourself a paper cut and then notice how like alert that makes you to like the sensitivity of your hands. Like nerve pain is never fun, whether it's a cut or compressing a nerve, it's never fun. And so that can lead to some sciatic nerve pain when the piriformis is kind of too tight and kind of strangling around the sciatic nerve. Okay, so that's like a thing. So what do most people do? They go, okay, I'm going to put the lacrosse ball in my butt, like where the piriformis, where I think it is, and then roll it out, and that'll make it better, right? Well, what do we always say? If you've been on Facebook Lives with me before, you know this already, and you already know what I'm going to say. Our body is always trying to save us and help us out. It never does anything that doesn't have a good reason. Okay? Just like you never do anything without having a good reason, right? So like your body's doing the same thing. So there's a reason that your piriformis is getting a lot of hypertonicity in it, and is worth exploring what that is. It's not simply because the piriformis hates you and is like, well, I'm going to get all tight now. That's not why it's happening. So just sticking a ball into the area to massage it isn't going to actually change the root cause of what's happening in your piriformis and in your hips and in your butt. Okay? So the second part, before we get into solutions, the second part is this. The piriformis attaches where the sacrum meets the hip area. Okay? So where your ilium and your sacrum meet. So sacrum is the bottom of the spine, way below the lumbar, way at the bottom. Piriformis comes up and attaches on there. So when the piriformis gets hypertonic and gets just too much tension in it or too much tone to it, it actually can change how the SI joint sits and is positioned. And the SI joint pain is another thing that also can be felt in a similar area to piriformis pain, but they are quite different. And the reality is that SI joint area needs to be able to have the ability to tip slightly to provide like kind of the life like giving support that our spine does. And when the piriformis locks down on it, it keeps that SI joint in position and doesn't allow it to move along with your body. And if you've noticed your spine lately, it is built to move. It is built to like flow and like dance and bend and stretch and do a back bend. It's meant to like move. You have all of these joints in your spine and they're all meant to articulate. So when one of them gets thrown off, that certainly is going to impact how the rest of them function. So it behooves you. We're still on. We're going to keep going. And I apologize. That's the internet. And if it cuts out, we'll jump back on. If you have SI joint issues, the entire spine is going to be influenced by that, as well as your hip complex. Because again, spine comes down. It's sitting inside the hip complex. And then you've got femur running down here. All of these guys have to talk to each other very well. So one thing you could start doing to address an issue with the piriformis where it's feeling too tight, feeling like it's hypertonic, it's influencing your SI joint, is to actually start strengthening your torso so that your spine is more stable and feels more secure in your body and can move safely and with control. So the spine and any part of the body that needs mobility is funny. You want it stable so that it can be stable and you want it to be stable, but you also want it to be mobile and capable of like flowing and all that stuff we just talked about. So going back to our piriformis, to start addressing our piriformis discomfort, it might be a smart idea to actually take a look at your torso. And this is why when people are in my program, The Unbreakable Body, they actually assess each pillar before they start so that we know where they're coming from and where they're at with each of their pillars, and then can create a unique and custom program for them based off of each of the pillars individually and how they interplay with each other. So everybody gets that when they're in the program. So if you're not in that program and you're kind of setting up your own thing, if you have some piriformis things going on where you have that chronic pinching or tightness in your butt or sciatic nerve pain or SI joint pain, it may be worth it to take a look at your torso and see if you could start implementing some better tools to make your torso strong and stable so that your lower part of your spine, down by where your hips and your pelvis and your butt is, actually doesn't have to hold the hypertonicity as much as it is currently. Second thing regarding hypertonicity. Guess what influences hypertonicity? What's happening in here? So we see some connections now as people are looking at smart people. I say we. It's not me doing the studies. I read them and then I read them to you guys. Smart people who do studies are finding and noticing that our perception of ourself and how we are seeing the world and how much type A behavior we exhibit and how much controlling behavior we exhibit and how well we are with ourselves, how much stress we're under, that absolutely influences the tone of your muscle. So while it would be amazing if I could just be like, exercise A, B, C, guys, that fixes your piriformis, makes your butt really strong, guess what? Those are great starting points, but they also are hopefully for you a launching pad to go, what else is going on in my life that could be influencing this? Do I need to drink more water? Do I need to have a conversation that might be uncomfortable? Do I need to change my job? Do I need to get more sleep? All of these things, okay? And I know some of you are like, ugh, I don't want to hear that because that's like the icky, gross stuff that I don't want to look at. Sorry, I'm just the messenger. This is what your body needs. Yes, there are drills we need to do, like starting to make your torso stronger to actually have your piriformis start functioning better for you. But also, there is this whole thing. You are a whole being that is interacting with a whole world. You might want to take a look at that stuff too to help your body feel and move better. Okay, so next aspect. So piriformis is always to blame. People always want to like give it a hard time, very much like the plantar fascia in the foot, which we talked about last week on last week's Facebook Live, and why that is not the culprit for all of the issues you'd like to blame it for. Your piriformis isn't to blame for everything. Another aspect of why maybe the piriformis gets overworked or gets too tight or doesn't work the way you want it to work could be because other small muscles in your glute complex aren't doing their job. So we're all familiar with the glute max, right? And we maybe have heard about the gluteus medius, and perhaps you've heard about the gluteus minimus as well. They're like a big fan-shaped series of muscles that kind of sit on the top of your butt. You see them if you see someone's butt. Well, you hopefully would if they have tone in their butt. Don't stare at people's butts unless they allow you, okay? Or do it really shouldn't even say that. Just don't look at people's butts, okay? Moving on. Those you can see. There are also muscles underneath. The name for the 6 of them that I'm thinking of is the deep 6. And there's an article on Fit for Real Life about what to do if you think your piriformis is to blame. I would encourage you to look that up because you'll learn more about the deep 6 in that article. The deep 6, their job is to also help your femur, your leg bone, to sit properly in the pelvis. And when it does that, everything works really well. But when those muscles don't get to do their job and keep the femur coming up here, sitting well inside the hip socket, which is part of the pelvis, things go a little haywire. And you start having stability issues in your hips, and you start having weakness in your glutes. And as you may have experienced, as someone who, if you are quad dominant, you start having other muscles try to help out for what the glutes should be able to do on their own. And this is why squats and lunges are great, but if you don't have great neural drive to the entire glute complex of muscles, meaning glute max, min, and med, and then also the deep 6. If you don't have that, you're going to have to find activation and function and muscle strength elsewhere because, again, your brain is going, she wants to do a lunge. Okay, well, we don't have the butts. Okay, well, let's get some quads. Let's do that. And you start using some other muscles and other tissues to do the job of what the glutes should be doing. And so in like the strong glutes aspect of the Unbreakable body, there are several exercises that actually get you into those deeper muscular connections to make your glutes work better. And I thought about trying to show some things today, but really you just can't in the context of how much time we have today. So if you want to learn more about how to get in and actually send better neural drive to your glutes, including the deeper muscles, and how to actually build strength, not only in the mid-range, but in the end ranges, start doing some reading on things like functional range conditioning, or get with a practitioner like myself or many others that are across the country and around the world who teach FRC training. Or work with a coach or get a book who understands actually how to make things like glutes function really well and isn't just going to say, well, do so many squats and so many lunges and call it a day. Because often that is not the root of the issue. If you have had sitting at a desk for a long period of time or any sort of injury that is like to the lower body, your brain is already kind of like devalued the glutes a little bit and moved some of that neural drive elsewhere so that you have better firing and support. Because again, your body always wants to support you. If the glute muscles aren't going to be able to do it, your body will just go elsewhere to make that happen. Does that make sense? So that brings us to treadmills and why I am not a fan in any way, but not just because they're boring, but also that. Unless you are on like a curved treadmill that you are running under your own power by pushing it, the tread will be moving, right? And it often is on a flat surface. Maybe you set it as an incline, but it's still flat. It's not a curved treadmill like the Woodways that kind of are at the high-end professional places. The problem with that is the tread moves your leg backwards at the back end of the step. And you're walking too, but the tread is also pulling you back, which means your glute doesn't have to do as much work to pull you into hip extension as it should. And that changes instantly how your hip flexors on the front, your psoas, your iliacus, and even part of your quad, how those work to then pull the femur forward for your next step, kind of the swing phase forward through to the plant phase and then pushing through again. By influencing that in a kind of suboptimal way, you're teaching with every single step you take on a treadmill, you're teaching your brain and your body how to go, don't use the glutes to do as much hip extension, use a lot more of the muscles on the front of the femur to pull that leg forward. Because what should be happening is big powerful contraction on the glute to drive your leg backward. Hip muscles on the front pick up on that and they kind of meet and pull forward and plant you back down again. You start to lose that the longer you're on a treadmill. So when I was coaching endurance athletes in Chicago, I was like, yeah, I get it. It's crummy outside. You need to be on a treadmill. However, we now have to do tons of extra glute work to re-bring that neural drive back to that area. So if you're totally down with that, cool. It's just going to take a heck of a lot longer training volume during the week to get it done. But if you're not cool with that, then it would be far better to go outside and bundle up for the weather. And again, there's never bad weather, just poor clothing choices. So bundle up, go outside, and actually get your workout done where you're under your own power, propelling your leg backwards. Makes sense? So I'm a big fan of avoiding treadmills as often as you possibly can. And if you have to be on them, to go in and do some of that neural drive and functional range control training to bring back the connection to your glutes and the fibers that are deep inside the glute, not just on that superficial layer of like glute max, glute med. Okay, so that brings us to another thing, hip extension. So when we walk or when we run or do many things in fitness and movement, our goal is to have great hip extension, which means swinging your leg out behind you, okay? Unfortunately, if you don't have great glute strength and great glute neural drive, you're going to have to find that somewhere else. And many folks will substitute spinal extension for hip extension. And I'm gonna show you what that looks like because this may be you. Okay, so hip extension, I'll stand up so you can see kind of like the midsection. Okay, so hip extension should be when I swing back. Now, okay, I'm gonna pull the shirt tight. If I don't have the capacity to do it from my glutes, I'm going to do it from my low back to assist the movement. And what I'm essentially doing is faking my way through hip extension, but also then starting to chronically overuse the fibers of my low back. Hey, low back sufferers, you guys have pain, right? This may be something worth taking a look at. So you see it's all like weaving and interconnected, and like, how do you pull this stuff apart? Well, we do, we're doing it right now. But you can see that it's never this. It's always like, we're focusing here, but there's like little room out for like light to spill out into like stable hips like we're gonna do next week, or up into like strong torso like we're gonna do in 2 weeks. The interplay is always connected, and it's your job to actually make that connection and see that everything works together, not just in isolation. So if you're not doing great hip extension because you don't have great neural drive and you don't have great glute function, the likelihood is higher. You're more likely to substitute spinal extension to do that. And those lower back fibers, while they are meant to work and work well for you, their job isn't to extend your leg every single step you take, every single time you run or go on a walk or do anything where you have to get into hip extension. So a very simple test you can do on your own is exactly what I just showed you. Set your camera up, take a video of yourself in like underwear is ideal because then you can see your bony landmarks of like your rib cage and your spine and your hips. You can see all that stuff. But in workout clothes is fine too. And then extend your leg back behind you as far as you can and bring it back forward, and see when you watch the video back, did your spine move as you did that? Or did all of it come from your butt muscles, like pulling that femur back the way they're supposed to? Now, it may take a little bit more of a trained eye, so if you're not someone who thinks you can read that on your own, get with a coach, work with somebody to like explore that and go, hey, I think my butt muscles don't do what they're supposed to. Can you evaluate me? And a good coach should do that for you, whether it's on Skype or in person. That is what us coaches are here to help you do so that you can operate more efficiently. Okay, so the questions we're going to get to shortly. I want to cover one more thing about glutes, and then of course, joke time, as always. Last thing I want to say, glutes and squats and deadlifts and all of that, super great, super beneficial. But I hope what you've seen so far is that there may be some need to back it up and actually start exploring things like the deep six, which the Piriformis is a part of, and the neural drive to the entire glute complex, and seeing if you actually have control of that. Because if you don't have control of the entire range of a muscle, you are setting yourself up for risk and for missed results that you could be having. And there's nothing I hate more than wasting time. So if you're going to do squats and lunges, it would kind of be cool if like you also knew that your glutes were functioning really well. For those who have ever done like band walking, that's a great example of a drill that is meant to isolate the muscles we're talking about today. However, also is an exercise that is very easy to cheat your way through and actually not get into what you need to. So I can't stress this enough. Find a practitioner or coach in your area who can actually help you on these things, and know that like that is time well spent, time and money if you're hiring a coach, well spent to actually get your glutes to start doing their job better, because it's very easy to cheat because you often don't realize you're doing it. We all have those things, right? Like where you go, you don't even realize that you're like, you always cut people off, or that you never actually listen when someone's telling you a story, or like these things that like you do that you don't realize you're doing it until someone brings it to your attention. That's kind of what a goat, nobody needs goats, what a coach is for. I just saw gluteal amnesia come up and I like transpired my words together. Okay, so that being said, there is time and place for like having a professional help you out, but if not, try some of the things I just talked about today and explore your own body and start being the caretaker of this thing that you are meant to be. Because coach or not, we're just here to facilitate the journey. It's your journey to walk. And at the end of the day, you are the one who is in charge of this entire process. Okay, let's get to some questions because I want to get to my joke, and I'm super stoked about that. Martin, is there some schedule in your live broadcast? I always broadcast the schedule in the morning of. There's no point to like do it longer than before that for me. And if a million people ask for that, we will. But it's always day of that I let people know that I'm doing them. Ellen is saying hi to Drew. So whoever Drew is, Ellen says hi. Jen, hi Jen, good to see you. How can someone work on strengthening glutes to help with upper leg knee pain? Well, my question would be why you have upper leg knee pain. That might require like doing some like movement evaluation stuff to see like why that's happening. But upper leg knee pain, that makes me feel like quads are doing a whole bunch of work that they shouldn't be doing. So then my next questions would be, what are you doing? Like, are you running a lot? Are you hiking a lot? Are you doing step aerobics a lot? Are you like lunging a lot? Are you a power lifter? I would want to know soccer. Like, I want to know what other activities are happening that like maybe are lending themselves to supporting using the quads a whole bunch, and then seeing like, could we shift the balance of like, because that's the thing, guys, it's not that you're like, soccer is a notoriously quad driven sport, and women and men who play it often become quad dominant simply by the nature of the sport. Doesn't make the sport bad. It means their training has to be smart when they are not playing soccer, and they have to take this perspective of, I need to get enough in to train and be good, but no more than that. I call it the 1 ounce less principle. You may know it as minimum effective dose. The reality is you only need to train so much before it's just wasting time. Like, I know some people who train many hours per day for no real reason other than to keep getting better. My question to them always is, are you still getting better at like hour 3 of this? Like, there's a point where the returns are not consistent anymore. I'm not saying you're doing that, Jen, not at all. But that would be my question. Like, look at how many things you're doing that are maybe making your quads want to do more work, if that's the root of the issue here, and then saying like, how could we rebalance this so we actually spend some more time doing some other things and then can get even more out of that time spent doing whatever that activity might be, because you're fresher and you're not dealing with pain, and you actually are sending more neural drive to your hamstrings and your glutes and your hips the way they're supposed to. That would be my first thing that I would take a look at for you in regards to that. And then that also could mean that you do need to do extra work on glute strengthening and neural drive to your glutes comparative to other parts of your body. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, you don't have to do 1 exercise for chest, 1 for back, 2 for glutes, 2 for quads, and then call it a day. If you need to do 7 for glutes and 2 for your thighs and like 1 for your back and nothing for your chest right now, like, that's fine. That's great. That's like your perfect thing if that's what works best for you and what your body needs. So it doesn't always have to be this symmetrical thing. And also too, speaking of symmetry, if you have one glute that is just jacked compared to the other one, when I program this, and many coaches will do this too, it is common to go, yep, we're going to need to do some extra work on the side that's less good. And it doesn't mean you do no work on the side that's better, but you do less work than comparative to the side that needs more attention. Okay. Mark, get the psoas activated first. You'd have to figure out like if the psoas is functioning well or not. It's really impossible for any of us coaches or practitioners to actually know if a muscle has like activation going in, and that's semantics, but like we can tell if you don't have great neural drive by doing some movement and seeing how your joint functions, but we never can actually know like if the glutes are off. You'll hear this, glutes are off. Kinda, but that's not actually what's going on. And so I think that kind of does people a disservice to like say something that isn't quite right. And so we don't really know like if glutes are on or off. We don't have measuring tools to go in and do that. Most people don't. But what we can do is take you through movements and evaluate your joint. And if your joint and movements don't move in a way that is supportive of like long-term health and well-being and meet some basic benchmarks, like having complete range of motion, having control of that range of motion, and then starting to build strength in it. If you don't have those things, then we can go, okay, yeah, we can work there. So yeah, so when you're thinking about activation or neural drive, think of it more in like, how well does this thing work? How is that influencing the joint that it's a part of? Okay. All right, cool. Lisa, I need stronger glutes and I think I train them well, but on long distance runs, my butt burns so bad. Like piriformis pain, that would be my question. Because it may be a sense of like, it could be so many things as to why like a muscle is burning. So we'll leave that for a second, but thinking you train them well. So, okay, this is a lot of people. They go, well, I do lunges, I do deadlifts, I do high step ups, I do single leg glute presses. Cool. All those rock. First, do you have control of your hip joint and your knee joint? Since those are the two major factors that are going to be influencing things happening around your butt. Do you have control of them? Do you have complete range of motion? If you don't, you need to back up and actually address that stuff. Because if you don't have complete range of motion and you don't have complete control of the joint, meaning all the tissues know how to handle themselves through the entire range of motion at every length of the tissue, not just mid-range, but also end range, you're going to be missing out on some results that you could be getting from your squats and your deadlifts and your lunges. So that would be the first thing to back up and take a look at. Thanks, Julie. You're awesome too. Okay, guys, we're finishing it up today with a joke. I am so excited. Okay, ready? I worked on this one and also checked the internet to make sure it's like an actual joke and not just horrible, which I should probably do for all of my jokes, but whatever. Here we go. Okay, so a pickle and an olive were walking down the street, which is wonderful because it's good when your vegetables can get a little cardio in. And they were walking and the olive fell because his legs are shorter, and that sucks. But the pickle was so kind and so, oh God, he was so caring. The pickle squatted down right away and was like, oh my God, are you okay? Oh my God. And the olive looked up and he said, I'll live. You guys, it's so good. I officiated a wedding yesterday and I was so tempted to do a joke. And then I was like, this is a respectable affair. I will save that for everybody on Facebook Live. So you're welcome. Have a phenomenal weekend. Remember we did the first pillar last week. That was strong feet. Go back and watch that if you didn't catch it because it influences the glutes tremendously. Next week we do stable hips. The week after that we have strong torso. Lots of awesome stuff coming up. Have a phenomenal weekend, you guys. I will talk to you soon.